All right, I'm sure you're interested on how you did on that quiz. You'll find out soon enough. They're still being graded. Looks like some people did prepare and did memorize those muscle names. I know that was a lot for one night. That was the whole point of the thing. Having to memorize 19 technical words in one night is extremely hard, no doubt about it. And I didn't expect to get a lot of 100% on this. It was an opportunity for you to practice some skills in a place where it doesn't really matter that much. You know, if you bomb one quiz in human anatomy, it's not going to hurt your grade that much, and maybe you'll learn something from the experience. If you did memorize those muscle names, I think it will really be to your advantage for the next one, the bone or skeletal exam or quiz, which is going to be on Wednesday, and for all the ones that come down the line. That's about as tough as it gets. There are more bone names to learn, but a lot more of those I think you know, and they're not quite as difficult to spell. You have a question? Yeah. Today at lunch. Okay? And if you are gone for any quizzes, remember it's your responsibility to follow up, and you have to do that within a day. If you're gone for one day, you get 1 day. If you're gone for 2, you get 2 days, and so on. What you should have out right now is your pencil, this handout that I gave you on the skeletal system, your highlighter if you got it, and if you want to color in some of these drawings and color code them, that's fine. You're certainly going to color code when we get to this guy. This is the bone identification sheet. I haven't gotten to this yet today, but this is the thing we're going to be filling in tomorrow. I haven't passed it out yet either. Okay. Were you here on Friday?
Yeah, but I was on.
Oh, okay. It's in the back. If you didn't pick that up, it's in the back. Pick one up now. Okay? All right. Now, today we're going to read through this again. Your homework was to read it and highlight it and know the information so that tonight you could focus on the new stuff I'm giving you, and tomorrow night you could focus on just learning the bone names so that Wednesday you're prepared. If you did nothing, you never read this, the first time you're going to hear it is today when we discuss it. Less likely to stick with you than if you read it as well as heard it again today when we went over it. So that is, again, a big part of your success is not waiting till the last minute, spreading it over time. You know, those bones are going to be hard enough to learn in one night. You don't need to have to be studying this stuff on top of that, okay? But when I gave you the stuff on muscles, I didn't really go through and give you a lot of information about this is what I'm going to find important, this is not as important. I just gave you notes. What I want to do today is when we go through this, and you're going to read it out loud, is see if you can figure out what I find important. Because that's the key, and it's a key that I didn't figure out until much later. I now realize that being successful in school is like being successful in any athletic event, in a game, for instance. You have to learn what the rules are. And I realized, not until college, into college, that the person who sets up the rules are, the people who set the rules are who? No, I mean the rules for that class. How you're going to be graded, what you're expected to do. The teachers. It's the same way in college. It's the professor, okay? They're the ones that set up the rules and the expectations of what you're supposed to do on assignments, what they're looking for. And that means that when you come to school and you go from one class to the next, it's like playing in 6 different games, okay? Now, if you play baseball or softball, you know how frustrating it is as a pitcher or as the batter to be up there and you just threw a strike and they keep calling it a ball. And you can yell and scream at the umpire, you'll probably get kicked out of the game, or you can just keep trying to adjust your pitch until you figure out, oh, that's what he's going to call a strike, okay? And now you're going to be successful because you changed what you were doing to fit the rules. Does this make sense? Okay. But unfortunately, a lot of us are stubborn and we don't do that. We do the equivalent of yelling at the ref. Why did you call that a strike? That wasn't a strike, that was perfect, That was way outside, or whatever the case may be. Well, it doesn't do any good to yell and scream at the teacher. If they're the ones that are grading it, you should give them what they want. And like I said, I didn't figure this out until much later. Now, I thought in some cases I could write better than the teacher. I knew a better way to do the assignment. Yeah, they asked for 5 paragraphs. They asked for me to include certain things in the paragraphs, but I don't like what they want. I'm going to do my own thing. And I'd write up what I thought was an excellent paper, and I'd turn it in, and I'd get a C or a D. Why? Because I was basically saying, I don't care what you think. I'm going to do whatever I want. It's kind of insulting to the teacher, see what I mean? And that's not too smart. It's kind of like yelling at the rep. You got to figure out what it is they want and give them what they want. And every teacher's a little different. And over time, you'll learn. You know, it's hardest at the beginning of a school year because you're learning each of your teachers and what is it that they want. You know, if Mr. Sanchez cares about numbers, then you're going to make sure that you memorize the numbers. But you already know that's one thing in here that I don't care about. Now, be honest, by a show of hands, how many of you highlighted 206 in the second paragraph? Okay? How many of you highlighted, 18% in the first paragraph? So you're not following the rules I gave you. The rules I gave you, or the suggestion I gave you to make your life easier is, number 1, will the teacher ask a question on that information? If they're not going to ask a question on it, then why did you highlight it? How many of you remember me saying, I don't care about numbers? Okay, well, most of the class. I did say that. You want to spit out whatever's in your mouth? Yeah. So I don't care about numbers, so why did you highlight it? Maybe you're interested, and that's fine. You can know it for your own interest, but it's never going to be on a quiz or test. So that's your first test. Ask yourself, when you go to highlight, is it something that he's likely to ask on a test? Okay. The second test is, do you already know it? Down in the middle of the page, you've got stuff on fixed joints, hinge joints, and ball and socket joints. How many of you already knew about those 3 joints? I've got a few hands. I wonder if any of you highlighted those. If you already knew about it, there's no point in highlighting. Again, the whole point of this exercise is not to highlight everything. If I wanted it in blue, if I wanted it in yellow, I would have copied it on yellow paper. It's to get it down to the absolute minimum. Don't we all want to do the absolute minimum? I mean, if someone said, you can study for an hour, or you can study for 5 minutes, which would you prefer? And they'll both give you an A. Let me think about that one. I think I'll take the 5 minutes, right? Why highlight everything? Because you're saying to yourself, I have to know all of this. Do you? No. You don't have to know it if it's not going to be on the test. You don't have to know it if you already know it. So, what do you think? Is this the right amount of highlighting? Too much? Too little? What would you say? I would say, and I'm not picking on you, because this is typical, but this is too much. Okay? We've got almost entire paragraphs that are highlighted. However, I will say this is better than a lot of people first period. Almost everybody, first period, despite my advice, had highlighted almost the entire page on both sides. There's no point in doing it, okay, if you're going to do that. Think of it this way. What Ms. Tarowski likes to teach is that imagine you're paying $1 for every word you highlight. It's going to cost you $1. You're going to keep it to the bare minimum, right? And that's what you should be looking for, just the main little snippets of information, and don't highlight the rest. That way, when you're done with this today, you go back and you just got these little bullets, these little key things that are jumping out at you. And you don't have to read a whole paragraph. It's very brief. Okay, so we're getting better there on the back side. Okay? And then, since you've already read it once and highlighted, and then we read it again here, this is the second time you've heard it, I'll bet you know about half of that stuff that you already highlighted. So once you know half of it, then you can get it onto index cards. How many use index cards for study? Got 3 hands. Boy, guys, I'm telling you, this is the best method that I ever came up with, that I ever have used. And putting one piece of information, like ball and socket joints, on one side of the card. On the other side of the card, drawing a picture of a ball and socket joint and giving some examples. It is so good because now you have little flashcards. You can give the stack to your mom or dad, have them quiz you, set it in front of your dog, have your dog quiz you, quiz yourself. It's a great way to review the information. And then once you know the card, what do you do with it? You take it out of the stack. You get fewer ones until you're down to just 2 or 3 cards. And once you know the entire stack, then you know you're done. See what I mean? That's the hard part with studying. It's like studying is this, let's go study. What does that look like? Does it look like this? Does it look like this? Does it look like looking at flashcards? Once you know exactly what you're supposed to do to study, you know when you're done. You go, oh, I'm done with my last flashcard. I went through them all. I've got 100% on the flashcards. I'm done. Put them away. Go out and play. See what I mean? That's what I'm trying to teach you guys. Not just this information, how to go about studying difficult things. Okay, so let's have a volunteer read those first two paragraphs for me and see if you can figure out what I would find important. Brianna?
The skeleton is an internal frame that shapes the bones and protects internal organs. The skeleton is a frame to which muscles are attached. It also stores certain chemicals for the body. About 18% of your mass is bone. A healthy human skeleton is made of 206 hard bones. However, the skeleton is not infinite. The skeleton is built to move at places called joints. Any place where bones come together is a joint. Bones are held together at most joints by a tough band of tissue called ligament. A joint usually has more than one ligament.
Alright, so, Sky, in those first two paragraphs, what do you think I think is important? Yeah, I think it's important that you know what a joint is. How many of you knew that a joint is where bones come together? How many of you highlighted the word joint? Didn't need to. You see my point? Okay? Don't highlight things you already know. I know it's hard because it's like, it's in bold type. I have to highlight. Cannot resist highlighter going towards words. But you can. If you know it, don't highlight it. What else in the first two paragraphs? Rochelle? Definition of a skeleton. How many of you knew a skeleton supports your body and gives you a frame for your muscles? Okay, if you didn't know that, then you should highlight it. But you shouldn't have highlighted 18% or 206 hard bones, because you already know that I don't care about those things. By the way, if you'll clear your desk of everything else, it'll make me feel warm and fuzzy inside. Thank you. All right. Anything else in those first two paragraphs? You're learning me and my patterns and what I like.
What a ligament.
Yeah, what a ligament is. And what is a ligament, Andrew? Connects what to what? Well, that's kind of it. Devin?
Bone to bone.
Yeah, well, bone to bone would be the better way of describing it. On a skeleton like this, all the bones are held together by wires and screws, okay, pieces of metal. In a real person, they're held together by thick bands of tissue called ligaments. If you've ever taken apart chicken, and separated one piece of chicken from another, you saw the ligaments that held those bones together. They went in between these tough bands of tissue. Now, what word do you think that you already know people confuse ligament with? Tendon. The tendon connects what to what, Nathan?
Muscle to bone.
Muscle to bone. How are you going to remember the difference between ligament and tendon? Two very similar things that connect stuff. How are you going to remember? How are you going to remember that? I mean, how's that going to stick in your head? Is there any trick in the word or any clues that you can use? See, I always like to use, if there's something in the word itself that sounds like something that reminds me of what it does, those are good tricks to use. Mitchell, just stop that. And if you got something in your mouth, if you'll please spit that out, whatever you have. I'll transfer over to your cheek. Any other ideas? Now, I can tell you what I hear several years, I've heard several years and earlier today, and it works for that person, maybe not for you. They remember ligament sounds like cement, and cement glues things together, and they think of the bones as being glued together. Well, cement holds things together and tendons also hold things together, so that doesn't quite work for me. But it worked for her. That's something she could remember. Ligament, cement, holds bones together. Okay? Bones are hard like cement. I don't know. If that works for you, great. Sometimes the silly, goofy, sick, disturbing stuff is the best stuff to remember things by. But you have to come up with a little trick. Head up, Monet. So for me, I have an easy way of remembering which is which. I just know already that this thing on the back of my calf is my Achilles tendon. And all you got to do is follow it on up and it goes to your calf muscle, right? And on the other end, it goes to your bone of your heel. There you go. So if you know that that's a tendon, then you know the other one is a ligament. Whatever works for you. But if you just look at that and you go, oh, I'll just remember, a ligament does this and a tendon does that. That's not something that's going to stick with you. You have a little trick. Ligament, cement. Every time you see the word, you think cement, it will remind you in 20 years from now, 40 years from now, head up, Matt, you will remember that. This is what I'm trying to show you guys, these little tricks, okay? Next paragraph, Michaela. Thank you. So, again, trying to figure out the teacher. How am I going to get this information out of you on the quiz on Wednesday? What do you think I will do? Stuff you just read. How will it appear on the quiz? Yes. Okay. Any other ideas on what I might do? Nathan?
Multiple choice.
Multiple choice. Okay. What else? You think I might do the pictures, guys? Now, I've already given you a clue that I might do something like that because what did I do on the muscle quiz? I gave you the 3 different muscle fibers, right? And I had a little line underneath. You had to identify the type. Well, kind of makes sense that I would do the same thing here, doesn't it? Be easier to do that, and it would make sense. So, you could highlight a bunch of stuff up here in this paragraph. Or, you could put this into brain-friendly language. Your brain likes pictures. Why use words when you've got pictures already drawn for you? So if it were me highlighting this for the quiz that I know what's on it because I made it, I wouldn't highlight anything in that paragraph. Instead, I would highlight fixed joint, hinge joint, ball and socket joint. I would highlight no movement, back and forth, and circular movement. Okay? And then you've got a picture. Now, I'm also going to ask you examples of each. Well, in the picture, I show you one example. So all you got to do is write in what that is. What's the picture, the first picture here? On the bottom. Skull. It actually has a technical name. The technical name is? Famous board game? Cranium. So I'd write cranium in there. Okay? See, some of you doing it, some of you aren't. That way, all the information, instead of being in a big, long paragraph that my brain doesn't like, it's in one section all together in picture form whenever possible. So cranium would be an example of a fixed joint. Now, let's look at that. And I would write cranium right in there and I would highlight it too so it stands out. Your cranium is a fixed joint. Now, you often think of joints as places where the bones move. And that's usually the case, but not always. This joint of your skull, of your cranium, wasn't always fixed in the sense that it never moved. At one point, it actually did allow there to be movement here in the skull, the cranium. You see, your skull is not one solid bone. It started as separate bones. Here's one here, here's one here, there's another one here, another one back here, and a bunch that make up your face and your upper jaw. And those bones fused together. They hardened and made one solid bone. But when before you were born, they were all kind of separate pieces. And even after you were born, they were separate pieces. Why? What advantage does that offer? Why would you want a skull that can wiggle around and have loose pieces? Nathan?
Because it needs to grow.
Okay, because the head needs to grow. That's certainly true. What else? What traumatic thing must the baby go through in their early years?
Being born.
Being born. Okay? If a skull like that has to fit through that opening, okay, wouldn't it be advantageous if the pieces could kind of move a little bit, squish around? Okay, so when baby's born, Dad looks over there and goes, "Oh my God, I have a conehead child." And he's got this little pointy head, right? You don't have to go over and get a rubber mallet and smash it back down, okay? The baby's head will be fine. Would you please take that down? Your little monument? Thank you. The baby's head will be just fine. It will go back to its normal shape. Yeah, they're going to look a little weird for a while after childbirth because it's all squeezed out, but it will eventually take its normal shape. Now, that doesn't mean that the skull suddenly becomes hard and solid in one piece. The baby still has places where the bone has not fused together and they can actually move, and there's weak spots. You know what those are called? Come on, babysitters, you should know this. Soft spots. And why are soft spots important? That's right. You're not supposed to take your thumb and push on the soft spot, okay? So Patrick's soft spot is right about here. I know that I can safely do that now and not cause brain damage. I hope. Well, his eyes did cross. Okay? But this spot right here on a baby, the bones have not hardened. They are more like this. They're more like this in these areas. And so we call them a soft spot. The technical name is fontanelle. Okay? And if you push on that, you're pushing pretty much on the brain, and you can cause brain damage. So you've got to protect the baby's head. On the back, we have the same situation. One bone here, and one here. They all come together. There's a little T here. That's another soft spot we've got to be careful about because the baby's brain is growing and vulnerable, and the skull is not yet hard. We'll talk about the hardening of your skull. That comes on the back side later. But that's an example of a fixed joint. And if you look at those little lines on the skull, it's almost like puzzle pieces fitting together. It's like this. And it makes a jagged line like that, okay? Because it almost looks like your skull has been stitched together, they use a term for stitches. Does anyone know the medical term for stitches? Starts with an S2. Not stitches, but nobody knows. Sutures? Or sutures? Oh, sorry, I beat you to it. Too slow. You lose. I lose. Sorry. Sutures. Those are sutures. So that they call that line. It looks all jagged. So kind of motion you get there once your bones form a solid skull is no movement. Before, around childbirth and for a time afterwards, you get a little bit of movement there so that the skull can shift its place. All right, the next one we have is the hinge joint, back and forth. Hinge like a door. Head up, man. Like a door. So it only goes back and forth. And the answer I get on the quiz quite frequently when I ask for an example is arm. What's wrong with that example?
It could be your shoulder.
Yeah, it could be your shoulder. And what kind of joint is this? Ball and socket. So what you should be saying is what? Elbow. So that's the example I would write in that space. Elbow. That's what you're shown there. And where else did it talk about? Your knee is also a hinge joint. There's a little bit of motion to the side in that joint, but it's primarily a hinge joint. By the way, I'm only showing 3 different kinds of joints here. There are more than that. There's a gliding joint and a number of other kinds of joints, but we're going to keep it simple. The third one there is the ball and socket. And we already mentioned the shoulder is a ball and socket, and the other one would be the hip. Ball and socket joints make the world go round. They allow us to do all the cool sports skills. Okay, so last time I'm going to ask you now, Matt, and then I'm going to send you outside. If you're not going to listen, you might as well sit out there and read it on your own. Okay, ball and socket joint, 360 degrees motion. They give you all those cool sports skills because you have all this different kinds of motion that you can create out of them. But they all also are ones that are worn out a lot by sports. Okay? All right, so all of this stuff, and with the additions of the examples that you wrote there, hip and shoulder, don't say leg, because remember, leg's too general. We're done now with that part. Now we only have one more section there on the front. Let's go to Tyler. Thank you. All right, so here again, I'm going to give you an example of how you take words and you turn this into something that's brain friendly. In that one paragraph, I gave a number of different examples for cartilage, where you would find it. Name some. Ear. Nose. Ribs. Right here, see this stuff? Ribs, what else?
Voice box.
Voice box. Anything else? Yeah, well, at the ends of all of your joints, you have cartilage. So what I would do, rather than have all these words that my brain has to read and then think, what does nose, ear, voice box, what do those words mean? I could sketch a little picture there of a little guy, and I could color in those spots, right? I could show a little blue nose, a little blue ear, a little blue on the neck, a little blue on the ribs, like that. And then I have in one image, boom, there's everything right there. Now the truth is, guys, is that cartilage isn't just found in those spots. That's where you have big collections of cartilage. But it's found at the end of any bone, where bone comes to bone. A lot of people get confused where cartilage ends and bone begins. You know, people look at a skeleton and they're like, what happened to his nose? He lost his nose. You do understand that everything from here on out is cartilage. Okay? Basically, what sharks have for a skeleton. All of this is cartilage. And stuff that's cartilage can become more like bone if we add certain chemicals. We'll get into that here in a little bit. Your ear, your external ear, is all cartilage. Ladies, you get attacked and you think your life is at stake. Okay? Here's a good self-defense technique. You cup your hands and you clap both ears at the same time. Don't ever do that on anyone that you're not thinking is trying to kill you. Okay? You burst their eardrums, and they're in intense pain. And if they don't crumble to their knees and stop attacking you right there, there's a good follow-up to that. You clap the ears, you grab the ear, and you rip it off and you show it to them. Nothing's more depressing than seeing someone holding your ear out there in front of you, still bleeding and blood squirting out the side of your head. You're like, maybe I don't want to attack her, okay? So that's just cartilage. Yeah. No, don't do that. Don't even fool around with that. Seriously, that is dangerous to do. Even just a little bit to yourself, you could rupture your eardrum. All right. So cartilage. In addition to those places I just mentioned, okay, it is found at the end of every bone. So like in your knee, here's my upper leg bone, my lower leg bone. This is covered. This end is covered in that cartilage. And you probably chewed on cartilage. What am I talking about? Chicken, right? You're eating away. This is so tasty. Then you get something there, and it's like, what is this? And you can't break it down. You look like a dog with peanut butter in your mouth. You know, you're like, it won't go down, okay? And it's probably whitish or yellowish in color. You might call it bristle, okay? And it just won't break down. That's cartilage, and it was probably at the end of the bones there. All right? So take care of your cartilage, guys, because things you do now, you'll pay for later. You won't realize it until later what you did to yourself. Okay, I have problems with my knees now. Some of it is from years of being a catcher, but some of it is from just a few stupid things I did a few times. You know, I was too manly to use the ladder to go down off the roof. I just jumped because I was like Spider-Man, Superman. I could jump and it wouldn't hurt. And it did kind of hurt, but I wouldn't tell them, right? When you're jumping down off the roof, head up please, your bone ends are banging against each other like that, okay? And that cartilage is getting damaged. It may be torn, it may be broken down, and when you're 35, 40, they may have to go in and remove chunks of the cartilage. And you might end up with bone rubbing directly on bone. Your shock absorbers are gone, and your knees won't do what they used to do. Take care of them now. Don't do stupid things like jumping off the roof, because your knees may not feel it now, but you'll pay for it later, okay? Now, let me ask you this. How many of you have been told not to crack your knuckles because it makes them A, fat, or B, causes arthritis? All right, look at that. Look at the podcast. Oh, wait. Ooh, lots of people. Okay. Well, I got news for you. And you can share this with your mom and dad when they tell you next time. They're telling you not to do that. Maybe they truly believe that myth, and it is a myth. And they're maybe telling you not to do that and making up that story because they just find it annoying when you crack your knuckles. It does not cause arthritis. It does not cause your joints to get bigger if the following happens. Go ahead and crack your knuckles. You don't have to. She's afraid she's going to get arthritis. That's not a goal. Okay. If you can't crack them, you can't crack them. Now, crack them again. Okay. Some of you could crack them again a second time. Okay. Who could crack it again a second time? Okay, those of you that raise your hand, I'm not talking to you, okay? This does not apply to you. For the rest of us, the majority of us, when you crack your knuckles and then you try to crack them again like I'm trying right now, and mine always crack, but they don't crack now. If they don't crack again a second time right afterwards, it's not causing arthritis, it's not going to make your knuckles bigger, it's not any of that. That is a myth, that is a wives' tale. If your parents don't believe, I would refer them to a study performed at Johns Hopkins University, a very reputable university, and it says that they doesn't cause any damage to the joint, doesn't cause arthritis, doesn't cause it to enlarge. Here is what is actually happening. You just read about it in that paragraph. It talks about cartilage, so you should know what cartilage is and where it's found. But it also talks about a fluid. Within that joint, you've got a liquid, and it's called synovial fluid. It's kind of like the white of an egg. And that also helps create a little shock absorber in there. And when you crack your knuckles, you change the amount of space in that joint. And that fluid, think of it like soda, okay? In the can, when the can is sealed up, all the bubbles are mixed in with the liquid. If you could crawl inside a sealed soda can, you wouldn't see any bubbles, okay? Because it's under pressure and they're all sealed in there. When you open the can and you release that pressure, then the bubbles come up, okay? So what's happening is in your joints you have little gas bubbles that are forming. And they're there all the time until you pop them. When you stretch that joint, you change the pressure in there, you pop those little bubbles. And that's what the crack sound is. Little popping gas bubbles. Basically what you're doing is you're taking that gas and you're pushing it back into the liquid. It would be like having an open can of soda and then you find a way to seal it up and pressurize it again. All the bubbles are forced back into the liquid. Proof that that's the case is the fact that you can't pop it again. Because when you crack it, you're pushing the bubbles, you're popping the bubbles, and it takes a while for them to form again. For me, it took over an hour before I could crack my knuckles again. I did it first period, but I couldn't do it second period. Yes?
What about when you pop it out?
Okay, well, it's not, the joint is not the important thing. It's not whether it's your back, your neck, or whatever. Because you have that synovial fluid that you can create those little bubble pops with. The important thing is whether or not you can duplicate it right afterwards. So if you crack your neck like you just did, and you can do it again immediately, that's not gas bubbles. I can't tell you that's safe. I can't tell you that's not going to cause any damage. I don't know. It may be okay. It may not be okay. What often causes the little popping sounds that you can create over and over again are tendons or ligaments sliding over bone. and they're allowed to move a little bit, and you twist it, and the little ligament pops over something and makes a little pop sound, that may or may not cause problems down the road. I don't know. All I'm talking about is the knuckle cracking that you can't duplicate twice in a row. Okay? So that's a wives' tale, and there's many of them. I remember, growing up, my sister and I would be over at Grandma's house, and she'd have watermelons for us. Andrew, up here, please. And we'd be gobbling it down because it's the summer and we're hot and we want the watermelon. And we'd be eating its seeds and all, and Grandma would freak out. Why? Yeah. That the little seeds would grow in your stomach, and you would grow a watermelon and, alien kind of thing. That watermelon would just burst right out of our stomach and we would die. Okay? And now that one you guys know is not true. You know that a little seed can't survive in the acid of your stomach, but there are many other wives' tales like that that are out there that people still believe. Alright, so that was cartilage. We're on to the back now. Next paragraph. Let's go to Jason.
In the early stages of human fetus, the skeleton is made up of cartilage. As the fetus develops, cartilage is replaced by bone cells. Bone cells release compound calcium and phosphorus into space and between the cells. This makes bones hard and strong. The next of bone tissue is called ossification.
Ossification.
Ossification. Bone continues to ossify until a person is 20 years old. As the person ages, bone tissue may be broken down by the calcium and phosphorus compounds are lost. Bones become less hard. This causes bones to break more easily.
Okay, so I'm not sure now. Calcium and phosphorus, good or bad? Good. Calcium, good. Phosphorus, good. Make strong bone. Ooh, ooh. Okay? So in that paragraph, 3 things for sure that should be highlighted are calcium, phosphorus, and ossification. Another tip for you. Learn to pronounce things. If you can't pronounce it, you probably won't remember it. You'll just go, oh, it's that O thing. I can't remember. Okay? Let's try this out. Repeat after me. Ossification.
Ossification.
Good. That is the hardening of bones. And some of you have already, many of you have already had language arts today. You got this little guy, right? Don't you just love me? Now I'm influencing your other classes too. Yeah. This is the, I gave this to Mrs. Shirk. This is the prefixes and suffixes and other parts of words based on Greek and Latin words that are used a lot in medicine and human anatomy. If you know these things, oh my goodness, it is really helpful. There's so many things in medicine that I've never seen before, but I know parts of the word and I can kind of figure out what it is before anyone ever tells me. Okay? So, for instance, there's a prefix, a part of a word that's used whenever we're talking about bone. What is it? You just read it. Osteo or ossa, O-S-S-I-O-S-T-E-O. This is on your list right here. Having to do with bones. Okay? An osteopath is a doctor that deals with conditions of the bone. Ossification is hardening of the bone. Okay? And there's another word I know you've heard that has osteo in it. It's the reverse of ossification. Yes, that's exactly what it is. Osteoporosis. Okay, do you know who is more likely to get osteoporosis, men or women? Women. It happens to both, but it happens more to women as you get older. Okay, so think of it this way. What goes into concrete? Cement? Water? Is that it? Sand? And gravel. Okay? Now, if you take out the cement and you mix the, did we say water?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you mix the other 3 things together, what do you get? Mud. It won't harden. It won't make a nice, sidewalk or basketball court. It'll just be mud. When you add the cement, the secret ingredient, now it hardens into bone. Okay? So calcium and phosphorus are the secret ingredient. Head up, please. Are the secret ingredient for bones. Without those two chemicals mixed in, your bones will not fully ossify or harden. Your bones are still hardening. They haven't reached their full mature state. You've got to be fully grown for that. They're growing here in length. But that's why it's so important that you give it the right chemicals, the calcium and phosphorus. What's a good source for calcium? Milk. Okay? And they had a commercial a while back that I loved for milk, you know, trying to get people to drink milk. And it had a little kid sitting at his breakfast table, and he wouldn't eat his breakfast cereal with milk. And Mom kept yelling at him, "You need to drink your milk." And the kid said, "I'm not going to drink my milk. I want to be like Mr. Johnson. He never drinks his milk." And Mr. Johnson, the old guy outside, is like going to get the trash bags. And he reaches down for the trash, and he got it. And the two arms just tear right off, and blood squirting out the little stumps there. And the little kid gets a bowl of cereal. Okay, I guess I'll eat that now. He realized that calcium's important. Now, if you don't drink your milk, I'm not saying that your arms will pop off and blood will go squirting out. But I am saying that you need calcium in your diet. Matt? I hope those are all useful illustrations that you focus on. We're not even on that side, by the way. We're on the back now. Okay? But calcium and phosphorus are necessary for your bones to be hard and to be strong. What happens though, ladies, particularly to you, when you get older and there's changes in your hormones, just the opposite happens. Those chemicals are pulled out of the bone and they leave your body in your urine and you end up with weaker bones. It's like it's got little holes, little pores, if you will, in the bone. And it's called what again? Osteoporosis. So we got the bone part, osteo, and the porosis part, the little holes. Okay, I noticed I didn't see anyone write that down. Osteoporosis is the opposite of ossification. Don't worry about the spelling. Okay? Now remember that hardening of the bones, that's continuing to happen for you. You guys don't have that soft spot here and here anymore. But your bone still has more properties like cartilage than it will when it's later. Those soft spots of the little baby, when they have the calcium and the phosphorus, they harden and they form the solid bone. And that's ossification. Okay? And the other thing that's important to keep your bones strong and healthy is not just the calcium and the phosphorus, but exercise. When I do this every day, you know, when my leg bone deals with that stress of walking every day like that, that stress keeps the bone strong. When it's doing this, sitting on the couch watching MacGyver, whatever it happens to be, okay, it's not going to get stronger. And now you understand why Grandma, you know, 75 years old, goes into the bathroom, falls from this high up, just from standing, lands on her hip, and breaks right through this thick part of the bone. She breaks her hip, okay, because the bones can become very brittle without exercise and without calcium and phosphorus. And women, as you get older, you have to do special things to make sure that doesn't happen. Andrew, you want to read the next paragraph? Please, just the little one there. Have you ever? I'd like you to try.
Have you ever looked at a real skeleton on his life? If you look closely, you notice that it was held together with bones. The bones of most skeletons are held together by the ligaments. Muscles and bones are attached to one another by tendons. Ligaments and tendons are bone
Bundles.
bundles of connective tissues. You can feel your
Achilles.
Achilles tendon. It connects your heel and pelvis.
Good. right, was there anything new in that paragraph that we didn't already know? Did we know what tendons were? Yeah. Did we know what ligaments are? Yeah, that was mentioned previously too. So there's not really anything that needs to be highlighted in that paragraph. The next 3 paragraphs all have to do with that picture at the bottom. So whenever possible, try to use the picture because your brain likes it much better than the words. Mitchell, next paragraph.
Although bone is very fine, it is limitation. As many cells and little work action. The outside of the bone is blood, and marrow is a soft tissue and synovial. It contains nerve and blood vessels. There are 2 kinds of marrow, red and blue. Red marrow is found in flat bones such as the ribs, and in the ends of long bones such as ribs and arms and legs. Red marrow is blood cells. Yellow marrow is mostly fat tissue. It is found in the skin of long bones. Yellow marrow is also produced red blood cells if there is a red vessel there. One trombone, which marrow is red. The body which is yellow marrow is
You guys seen X-Men, the movie? You know Wolverine, right? In addition to being able to heal up and everything, he also has a very special thing. What is it?
claws.
Well, yeah, besides the claws. The claws are made of what?
Steel.
Yeah, and what about his skeleton? Yeah, it's some special metal, right? His entire skeleton is supposed to be some special metal. Now let's just say, hypothetically, that I could go in, would you please stop the clicking? Thank you. I could go in and I could remove all your bones and replace them with steel or some special tough metal. Would that be good? If I had the technology to do that? Would you live? No. You would die almost immediately, Mitchell. It's hard to problem. You would die almost immediately if I took out your skeleton and replaced it with metal. Just because this is hard, just because it's bone, does not mean it's dead. If it was not living tissue, when you break a bone, how could it repair itself? It is, okay? And that's one thing that's just doesn't quite seem right to many of us. We think that this is just like rocks, you know, hard pieces of wood in your body. It's not. It is living tissue like anything else. And in fact, not only is it living tissue, but inside the bone, some very important things are going on that have nothing to do with attaching muscles to the bone or holding your body up. These things are more important. They keep you alive. I'm talking about the jelly donut. Everyone dodges the jelly donut. What is so scary about the jelly donut there? What is that? That's my model of what? Yeah, back up here. This is a red blood cell model, okay? Very important you understand, not actual size, okay? The red blood cells are microscopic in your blood, and these guys are like little truck drivers. Their job is incredibly important. They carry oxygen from one place to another. So just because you do this, and you get oxygen into your lungs, doesn't mean it's going to make its way out here to all my different cells. You need these things to actually carry it through your arteries and all the way out to the cells and back through your veins all the way to your heart and to your lungs again. Yes?
Why would we bring up blood?
Well, we'll talk about the respiratory system. There are little sacs that separate the air from the blood. And that's where the oxygen actually comes through that little sac and attaches itself to each of these red blood cells. Okay? So these little tiny microscopic things that don't have a drug name printed on them. Okay, that's not on there either. These little microscopic jelly donut-like things keep you alive. If I were to remove your red bone marrow, you would die because you wouldn't have a new supply of red blood cells. And even though you would do this, you would feel like you're suffocating. Your tissues wouldn't get any blood, and they would turn black, and you would die immediately, okay? Because they wouldn't be getting blood. The red bone marrow that makes these things is found in the end of your long bones. It's found in your flat bones, like your hip bone and your shoulder blade, and also your ribs. Those are flat bones. Okay, so these are the places where you're going to find the red marrow. All these places here. The yellow marrow is mostly made up of what? Fat. Yellow marrow is mostly fat. In fact, fat is very yellow. It kind of looks like gravy, Thanksgiving gravy that you stuck in the refrigerator and came back to 2 days later. You know, it's all that gooey, thick stuff on the top. You got to try to microwave it and make it look like gravy again. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Fat's gross. I think it's the grossest thing inside the body. Blood, that's nothing. Fat, gross. Yeah. And animals know where fat can be found. Now you need some fat, don't get me wrong. Fat's good. Because if you're trying to survive and you have a choice, eat fat. Fat has a lot of calories stored in it. It's more likely to keep you alive. So when you give a bone to your dog, not only do they chew all the meat off the outside of the bone, but they'll crack into it and try to get to the marrow inside. In here is where we're going to find the yellow marrow in the center of long bones. Okay? So, obviously you need to know red and yellow marrow, and you need to know where they're located. If you look at the picture at the bottom, you can see that information. So it's not necessary to highlight in the paragraph unless you want to. Okay, next paragraph. Let's go to Bethany.
Bones are covered by a thick, tough membrane called the
Periosteum.
Periosteum. This membrane contains blood vessels. Other blood vessels connect the inside of the bone with the membrane around it. These vessels run through tubes in the bone called Haversian Canals. Blood vessels and Haversian Canals carry oxygen and digested food to bone cells and marrow. They also remove waste materials. This blood supply keeps bone cells alive.
Okay, so let's try the repeat after me game. Make sure you can pronounce these. Periosteum.
Periosteum.
Haversian.
Haversian.
Okay, if you can't pronounce it, you're not going to remember it. Peri, what does that mean? You've seen that in another word. What word? P-E-R-I. Does that ring a bell? The beginning of any other word you know?
Period.
No idea. Think back to the metric system and one of the worksheets. Well, that's true.
Periodic
No. What's the distance around the outside of this room called? Perimeter. Peri means around the outside. Okay? So periosteum is the covering around the outside of the bone. Osteo, remember that? Osteo means bone. So you can figure these things out. If you remember what the individual parts mean, you can figure out what a whole new word means. Periosteum is the covering around the outside of the bone. You don't really see the periosteum on this old cow's rib. It's been laying out and it has dried up and baked off by the sun and the elements and wind. So the periosteum's gone. But on a fresh new bone, it's going to give it more of that yellowish color. It's going to be a thin covering, but it's kind of really tough. So that's a periosteum. The Haversian Canals is the thing that surprises a lot of people. They don't realize, again, that bone is living tissue. And if it's living tissue, if this were to crack and break right in here, it needs blood to go to that area so it can repair it. So all of your bone tissue needs blood supply, just like anything else, just like your skin needs blood going to it. And if you look on bones, you'll see little openings like this hole right here on the rib. I'll pass some of the bones around to you tomorrow and you'll see more of that. That hole allows a blood vessel to go in there and run throughout the length of the bone so it can supply blood. Yes?
Is that why when you break a bone, it's on
No, that's usually because you're pinching on some nerve. There's a number of reasons that that could happen. But it probably could be something like that, pinching on a nerve. Things are moved around where they're not supposed to be. All right, last paragraph. Let's go to Sedona.
Bone tissue is made of growing cells. Minerals grow in water and water. Minerals make bone hard. The main minerals in bones are compounds of calcium and
Phosphorus.
phosphorus. Bone material varies from very hard to spongy. The matter is hard bone is compact but is tightly packed for strength. Spongy bone has open spaces that make the bone lightweight but still strong enough to withstand stress. How hard the bone is depends on the method of
Okay. So, looking at this cow's rib, you can look at the end and you can see all the little holes in there. That's spongy bone, little spaces. But you can also see that the outside of that bone is covered in the very dense or compact bone. So all of your bones have that covering on the outside of compact bone. But this part of your long bones is compact bone. It's not solid all the way through. It has a hollow center. What stuff is found in that hollow center right in here? What kind? Yellow marrow, which is mostly fat tissue. But in the ends, if this were solid through and through of compact bone, it would be way too heavy. So by making it spongy like this, it makes the bone lighter. And what substance found in the end? Red marrow. You've heard about people with problems with their bone marrow, problems with these red blood cells, and they need a bone marrow transplant. Well, if you're going to give that transplant to the person, they'll come in here and they'll put a needle into your hip here and get it from your hip bone, suck out some of that marrow. Inject it into the other person, and it will hopefully grow and start producing red blood cells. Yes?
My uncle had
A bone marrow transplant, and it took?
Yeah, he said it for a while.
He donated, or he?
No, he donated.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's not the most pleasant experience from what I've heard, going into your hip like that. All right, so let's just do a quick review and see if you've got all this stuff down. The covering over the ends of the bones is cartilage. Name 3 other places where you'll find cartilage. The voice box. Also the ribs here. The end of your ribs are covered in cartilage. The tissue that connects bone to bone. Thank you. Ligament. If you just know it, call it out. Muscle to bone. Tendon. Okay. The covering over the entire length of the bone. Say it again. No. Periosteum. Periosteum. The little passageways for blood vessels. Haversian Canals. Guys, there's a little pronunciation guide there. Okay, please don't start packing up now while I'm still talking. Haversian Canals. Hardening of the bone is called ossification. The 2 chemicals that you want in your bone. Phosphorus. The opposite of ossification. Osteoporosis. The 3 kinds of joints.
Long socket, fixed, and hinge.
You got it. And an example of a bone socket. Hip and shoulder. Kind of motion you get from it. Circular. Fixed joint example. Skull. Type of motion. Hinge joint example. Or kind of motion. Back and forth. Good. If you don't know that stuff well, that should be your homework to study that again. Now you can